Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. My guest today is Mark Olly, internationally acclaimed author, TV producer, presenter, writer, lecturer, broadcaster, musician, and artist. I'll be talking with him about his book, Europe's Roswell, 40 Years Since Impact. Mark Olly, welcome to Paranormal Yacker.
I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
When people speak of the Roswell UFO incident that took place in the US, I'm sure I can pretty much safely say with certainty they know it happened in Roswell, New Mexico. Where, Mark, in Europe did Europe's Roswell, which you write about, take place?
Mid Wales. If you look at a plan of the UK, Wales kind of juts out on the left hand side as you look at the map, and it looks a little bit like a pig's head. It's got sort of an ear, which is the island of Anglesey, and a snout which goes out into the Irish Sea. If you go sort of halfway up its brow, there's a place called Aberystwyth. And this particular unidentified flying object crashed a few miles outside Aberystwyth in a little village called Clonilla, which is up in one of the Welsh valleys. When I say it crashed there, it's got a lot in common with Roswell. As people know, the crash in Roswell was at a place called Corona, but the nearest big place that you could sort of stick a pin in, if you like, was Roswell. So that became known as the Roswell crash. Well, the same thing applies here. The little tiny village of Clonilla is in the middle of nowhere, and the crash happened a couple of miles outside of the village. So again, it's the nearest point on the map where you can stick a pin.
How did those who witnessed the strange flying craft that was buzzing over their homes describe what they saw?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It does share a huge number of similarities with what happened at Roswell, because at Roswell, when the craft came down, it came down in a desert, it came down at night. Nobody was there to witness it actually crash. Well, funnily enough, the same thing happened at Clonilla. It came down at some point in the night, wherever it was. It struck the top of trees in a forest and it scattered debris over about 4 fields. And the first witness to this incident was actually the following morning. It was a farmer called Irwell Evans, and he got up to go out and tend to his sheep. And when he arrived at the sort of the gate to the fields, and he was leaning on the gate, all he could see right across his fields were all these pieces of broken metal and pieces of foil, with the odd bit of girder and odd bit of other bits and bobs in there. But he didn't hear anything in the night. He didn't see anything in the night. He is the only witness to that enormous amount of crash debris. And most amazingly, one of the small differences is that particular craft that hit those trees, despite losing all of that fuselage, if you like, all of that shell, despite losing all that, it managed to fly off. So nowhere in those 4 fields was the disc with alien bodies hanging out of it, or, a couple of engines, or none of that. There was no hard, tangible vehicular wreckage anywhere in those 4 fields. So that's one of the dissimilar parts, if you like, to Roswell. But then what followed that you'll soon find out there's a lot of similarities.
Talking about the debris fragments that were found at the crash site, what did they look like? I know you said metal and things like that. Did they have any shapes to them, or did they look like something that we would know about?
The smallest fragments were tiny, really tiny, but the biggest fragments, which are quite interesting, were Irwell described as being 6 feet, which is 2 meters. So that is a huge piece of metal. They're all flat with a very, very slight curve to them. The smaller bits, obviously, you can't tell, but the bigger bits have just got this very slight curve. But they're all lying flat across the field. There's pieces of foil, which is honeycombed silver foil, which looks like it's been detached in some way from these sheets of metal. I think there was a girder and something that looked a bit like an aerial and a few other bits and bobs, but nothing that was recognisable, nothing with markings on, no serial numbers, no writing of any kind, not that Irwell can remember. On one side, most of the pieces of metal are grey. They're covered in a sort of a grey resin. And on the other side, there's sort of 2 different forms, if you like. One is covered in a sort of a green paint coating, and then the other one's covered in a green rubbery coating that's made up of thousands of tiny little hexagons all over the top surface. But that was it. That was primarily what was being looked at.
There was so much debris scattered about that locals were coming out of their homes to seek it out and take it back home with them. Why this curiosity on the part of locals, and What was it they thought they were bringing up, picking up and bringing back home to them?
Well, that's interesting. There's two sets of locals. One of them, the farmer who discovered the wreckage, phoned the police. The police then phoned the local Ministry of Defence, the local Air Force base. A couple of hours later, you ended up with loads of Air Force people, loads of police people swarming all over the fields, trying to, collect all this stuff up. And then also there were some guys there, sort of men in suits, that were clearly another set of people. We'd probably call them men in black. And they're ordering the other people around. Even the guys in uniform, the officers or whatever, are still being ordered around by these men in black. They stayed there all day clearing up. They put lights up, they cleared through the night. And when Irwell got up the following day, he assumed that they'd got all of the debris. Fast forward about a week or so, and there's a chap called Gary Rowe. He's a local. He lives in North Wales, and he runs the local UFO group for that part of the country. He gets from a news clipping service, he gets this clipping. It's for January 1983, and it says, earlier in January, there was this crash, and it goes into all the details. Most of the details I've just given to you. This crash at this little village called Clonilla. Now, being that he's reasonably local, he knows where Irwell lives, Irwell Evans, so he phones Irwell. And Irwell says, well, you and your mates are quite welcome to come down here and have a poke around and see if you can find any of this material. So anyway, Gary and a small team turn up. They have a look round. They can't find anything at all. Then Gary spots this cutting through the trees. And Gary, being Gary, basically said, well, they're going to be able to clear all of the fields, but there's no way they're going to be able to clear a forest at night. They're not going to get all the pieces of metal out of there. So him and his mates dive into the forest, and basically they can see a couple of bits of metal stuck higher up in these trees. Most of the trees have been destroyed. They've been sheared off. And then they find a couple of other bits of metal down in amongst the bracken and the thorns and what have you. So they get 4 pieces of the sheet metal, and they get 2 pieces of the foil on the first visit out of the woods. On the second visit, they don't get anything at all. And by the third visit, they get a phone call off the farmer saying, you're not going to believe this. It might not be worth you coming because they're tearing down the woods. They're removing the forest. So Gary's like, oh, okay, I'll phone the Forestry Commission and find out what's going on. So he phones the local Forestry Commission and says, why are you removing this copse from this farm? And the guy on the other end basically says, it's wind damage. And Gary goes, well, do you normally remove woods for wind damage? And the guy at the other end, who you can tell is probably smiling by this point, basically says, no. He says, but this particular case, we're removing the forest. So Gary took that to mean that the MOD was finishing the job, and it had just took them a few weeks to get round to it. But of course, that meant now that Gary and his team have got pieces of whatever it was that came down. So then the story moves forward again.
Scientific investigations of various sections of the debris have been conducted. What were the findings?
It's fairly obvious that if you've got some kind of mysterious debris like this, which nobody had seen in 1983, it's fairly obvious that you're going to have a look at it and have a proper look at it. So Gary took it round to a few of the people he knew. There's a couple of ladies who worked in aeroplanes. They said they didn't really know what it was. Eventually, he finished up at British Aerospace. Now, in this country, British Aerospace make military vehicles. That's what they do. They make military aircraft. So they took a piece of this, took a sample of it, didn't do the full analysis because that would have cost thousands of pounds to do. But they sent Gary back, it's probably about a 12-page report of observations and tests they'd done on it. And they, in their opinion, they said, this is back in the 1980s, remember, they said, this looks like duralumin. Now, duralumin is effectively a trade name. It's like, Coca-Cola or McDonald's or whatever. It's a trade name for about 200 different types of aluminium. And that was about as far as they went. They said, we can't identify the resin. We don't know what the rubber coating is. We don't actually know what this is. But it's a really pure alloy of duralumin, and we'd really like to know how to make this. So if you find out where it comes from, let us know. And that was it. That was as far as that went in the 80s. Fast forward to now, of course, we're writing a book. Philip's got contacts, Philip Mantle, the publisher. I've had contacts over the years. So we pooled our resources, and Philip basically got 2 laboratories, one in Australia and one in America. And we sent 1 sample to the Australian lab and 1 sample to the United States lab. So the one in Australia came in first, and it arrived, and we sort of started reading it. And it basically said, it's not duralumin. That's not what it is at all. It says they're partially right. There's aluminium in it, but it's what we call aluminium foam, which is a type of material where you mix two different materials together, one of them being aluminium, another one being reactive. It reacts and then it hardens at room temperature. So we know exactly what this is. Oh, and by the way, we think the grey stuff that's attached to it is a type of American glue. So we think, oh, that's probably the end of it. Then the American report comes back. The American report comes back. We open the front page and it goes, substance unknown. So we're like, oh, hang on a minute. This is going in a completely different direction. They had no idea what the glue was, and they had no idea what the hexagonal rubbery stuff was on it either. You've got to bear in mind, these are the Americans. So if it is an American type of glue, they should know what it is. But, and this is the real punchline, if you like, it comes back and it's 94+% lanthanum or lanthanum. Now, at this point, I had got no idea what that was. So I scurried off to the all-new periodic table that has this new section at the bottom. And sure enough, there it is, exotic metals. Now, when it says exotic metals, it doesn't mean exotic in the sense that it's rare. It's not. It's number 27th most common material anywhere. So it's up there with things like salt and basalt and quartz. It's common. It's all over the place. It's in the planets. It's in the galaxies. It's in meteorites, asteroids, all over the place. But it's incredibly difficult to extract and extremely expensive. So then you got to think, okay, you've got a sheet of aluminium. It's got this green paint on it that British Aerospace said wasn't aerodynamic. And then you got this other stuff, which is lanthanum, and that's got this rubbery stuff on it, which we don't know about. And that's really exotic. That's really unusual. Although we physically got both of them, and they do resemble, I'm going to say resemble, some of the technology we know about, none of that stuff, none of that material was known to exist in 1983. So that leaves you with an interesting possibility. And this is the cliffhanger in the book, if you like. The interesting possibility is it one of theirs? In other words, it's alien. It's an alien craft. Maybe, crashed at Roswell, or they have one in a hangar somewhere. Is it one of ours? Is it something the military have developed? Is it something, technology from the Second World War, super technology or something? Or is it something in the middle and it's a hybrid? Is it back engineered? Is it alien technology that we've got hold of and we've done something with? Now, those are not questions that I can answer at this present time. We just don't know. And some of those things we might never know unless we're scratching at the door of disclosure here. We're not kicking it open, but we're scratching at it. We're going, come on, chap, come on, you military guys and all that. We've got this material now. We know it exists. The least you can do is come out and tell us what it is. And that's kind of where that's landed, if you like.
Coverage at the time of the craft and the massive amount of debris it scattered over a vast area received very little coverage. You, Mark, reproduced that coverage in your book. One would think the incident would make headlines and have a long shelf life. It didn't. What do you think were the reasons for that?
I think if there's what you might call a playbook, if there's a way of dealing with things like this, that's where the real parallels to Roswell start to take over. Because you've got one farmer. You've got one farmer in Wales, one farmer in Roswell. The chap Matt Brazel in Roswell, rumour has it, he managed to save some of the fragments and he hid them in a case and he hid them in his house before he passed away. And lo and behold, we've got a recovery team in Wales that grab a small case full of fragments and materials. That's the same kind of thing. When you move forward then, in the Roswell case, you've got Roswell Daily Record, on the day and the day after they run the news story. Well, over here, we've got the Sunday Express. They run the news story. That's where this clipping comes from. It's something like the 23rd of January that this news clipping comes out on. But then that's it. No other newspapers cover it, not nationally, not locally, no radio stations, no television stations, nothing. So when we were doing the documentary version of it, which was for the 25th anniversary of the crash back in 2008, we went back to Andrew Chapman, who was the chap that wrote this article for the Sunday Express, and he keeps everything, absolutely everything. So he went back to his notebooks, came back to us a few days later, and he says, "You're not going to believe this. I've got no idea where that story came from." He said, "I must have gone back after the New Year break, around about January 3rd or 4th or whenever they go back to work." He said, "and it must have come round the office and just been handed to me to write up." He said, "because I've got no idea where that came from." So maybe it was local, maybe another farmer, maybe it was one of the MOD guys, maybe it was one of the police officers, but that story was leaked, if you like, out to the Sunday Express, and it only came out at the beginning of the year. So there's another similarity. And as you say, when the documentary came out in 2008, I'm like, yeah, this is going to go really big. Reality Films got it. It was made very well. Roswell. It went out. We did DVDs. Amazon Prime picked it up and a few other bits and bobs. But other than that, nothing. Absolute dead silence. I got one US radio station phone me and said, do you want to do an interview? I'm like, yeah, okay. And then they never got back to me, never came back to me. So the documentary didn't meet with any reaction. The television coverage didn't meet with any reaction. The newspaper didn't meet with any reaction. But at the time that it happened, that's the same as Roswell. It took a while for that to start gathering pace. Well, of course, now we're 40 years on from the crash now. So I think we're better placed now to have another look at it, reopen the file and see where it takes us. We have done, I mean, this is not even in the book. Well, it is in the book. It gets a brief mention. It says we did a Freedom of Information Act and we drew a blank. We've even done that. We've even, had a go at trying to find out what's known. According to the MOD, they know nothing.
What, Mark, was there about Europe's Roswell that got your attention and inspired you to investigate and write about it?
Oh, well, initially, I'm a professional archaeologist, and that's basically what I was doing at the beginning of the 2000s, around about 2004, 2005. I had my own unit. We were out digging, this, that, and the other. And then I bumped into Gary, actually, at one of these UFO conferences. It was a very famous one in this country called Probe, and it used to be on in Blackpool. It was on every year, and I met Gary there. And we were both speakers, so we got talking after the event over a curry, as you do, in a curry house somewhere. And Gary said, I've got this case I'd love for you to investigate. And then, oh, yeah, I'll help you any way I can, sort of thing. Didn't hear anything. Then about 12 months later, he says, how do you fancy digging up a flying saucer? And I'm like, what? That's not that sort of thing I get asked every day. And he's like, well, we've had a UFO, unidentified flying object crash. Maybe you want to come and have a look at the site. Anyway, we did a lot of investigation on the site. We discussed it. We looked at what had been done. And I mean, unless something hits the ground like a Spitfire doing 600 miles an hour and plows into the ground, unless that happens, there's nothing there really to excavate. Wales only has a sort of light coating of soil, and then below that it's solid limestone. So there was nothing there that I could dig up as an archaeologist. And then, of course, Gary pulls the trump card and he says, well, I've got a case in my garage with some bits. Oh, I'm like, oh, okay. Now you're talking my language. Physical finds, something we can get involved in and identify. And it kind of snowballed from there. I'm almost duty bound to investigate it at that point because we've got physical evidence. So that really drew me in. I've got to say, he doesn't keep any of it at his house now, by the way. It's all under lock and key in a unit somewhere. There's nothing there now. But when he shoved it under my nose like that, I went, there you go, have a look at that. I'm like, ooh, this is worth doing something with. So it really got my attention.
Your book begins with you writing that the greatest missing piece of the entire UFO puzzle is lying there physically before us and demands an explanation. Could you elaborate on that? And has the mystery of Europe's Roswell been solved? Or is that something yet to happen, which I think you've alluded to? And if so, when do you expect that to be?
Okay, there's two questions there. Well, the greatest piece of the puzzle for me, I mean, I'm a witness. I've seen flying craft. I've seen a couple of them, and members of my archaeology team have been buzzed by them when we've been out in the country doing various things. So to get hold of an actual piece of one, you're not talking to somebody about blinking lights or blurred memories or foggy footage or little dots whizzing around on a black background, none of that sort of thing. To actually get hold of a piece of something, that's really important. That's really significant. We can honestly say, it doesn't matter what it came off something that was in flight, it was unidentified, it was where it shouldn't be, it's got all the hallmarks of UFOs, and we've actually got a piece of it. We can do something with it. So that is incredibly significant. So all these people that have got all these accounts of what people have seen and books of even things like abductions and all the rest of it, there are very often fragments, there are implants and little bits of things, but we're talking about serious pieces of this. Whatever this is, we've got hold of some of it. I think that's a starting point. That's an enormous starting point. I think it opens the next chapter. It makes us re-examine where we're going with that. So it is enormously significant. I'm not saying any of the other books are wrong, because they're not. I'm not saying any of the eyewitnesses are wrong, because they're not. All of that is good quality material, but at the end of the day, it's really nice to physically have something that you can get hold of and have a look at. And I have to say, the book is extremely show and tell. It's done that way on purpose. There's big photographs of everything throughout the whole book, so people can look at it, they can examine it, they can see what this stuff is. Where do we go from here? The second part of the question. Yeah, we haven't given up. We're still going at it. You'll be the first person to know this, actually, because we have taken the investigation another step forward. We released everything that we knew, which is in the book. We've released the analysis exactly as we had it, with nothing edited out, apart from the description of why it was analysed, because essentially that's what the book is. The actual analysis, all the data is in there. And what we're now doing, and this is exclusive to you, we are actually banging on the door of the military. We've taken it a step further. We've looked at the Freedom of Information Act. There's a lot of extra leads in that where they're saying, there's various other places you can go to find data. So we're going to pursue that. That's clearly on the table to be done. At some point, I think I will release the Freedom of Information Act. Probably that'll come out as an article. It's not out yet, but I'm pretty sure it's coming. And then from now till probably about February, March next year, we're going to be pushing into contacts that we have within the aerospace industry and within science and development and technology. And we'll be trying to find out exactly what we've got and where it's come from. So I might be able to answer that question. Is it one of theirs? Is it one of ours? Or is it something in between? Next time you see me, you'll have to ask me what the result was. If it's after sort of February, March next year, I might be able to tell you where we get with it. I mean, for all I know, they might just slam the big green door in our face and go, we're not telling you. But I'm really pushing. I'm really pushing to get this sorted out. So's Philip. I mean, Philip's a long-standing investigator himself, as well as being a publisher. So, we're not the sort of people to give up easily.
I have to say I am honored by what you just told me, because I get exclusivity on that.
That is so brand new. We were only talking about it today. So that's how new that is. That is absolutely brand new.
Sagging vibes tell me there is another book coming on the information you're going to gather, and you know how to contact me. I definitely want to interview about it. I find it fascinating how you dissect everything and look into it. You give it as it is, and people come to their own conclusions on things. And the more you find out, the more mysterious, where's Agatha Christie when you need her? I don't know, but it's really great. Thank you. Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy Roswell 40 years since impact, how can they do that?
I'll tell you what, I'll do all the adverts. Okay, let's get the adverts out of the way. There's three things you need to know. One is anything you want to buy that's by me. There's 9 books, there's a few DVDs, bits and bobs that are out there. They're all of them on Amazon. Go to Amazon, find that cover, click, pay the money. A couple of days later, it comes whizzing through your letterbox. Dead easy. Well, all the other books are like that as well. There's, one on Arthur, one on Crystal Skulls, another one on the Green Man. There's Disappearing Ninth Legion on Romans, Robin Hood, tons of stuff out there. Go find them. Amazon, that's dead easy. If you want to see me in action, and this is quite exclusive as well, we've spent the last 9 months uploading all of my back catalogue of television productions and documentaries to YouTube. So there's the second place to go and look. Go and have a look on YouTube. My television series, Lost Treasures, which I did a staggering 18 years ago now, finally all 22 episodes are up there. There's 6 extras, tons of interviews, and about half a dozen documentaries. So it's worth going and finding me on YouTube. And the third thing is me. If you want to find me, I'm on Facebook. Come and find me on Facebook. And if you like what you see, drop me a message on Messenger and we can chat. That's how to find me. So there you go. Amazon, YouTube, Facebook.
Mark Olly, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. It was great to once again yak with you, and I wish you much success with Europe's Roswell.
Thank you very much, and very well done. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed the interview you just watched. So that you don't miss any upcoming shows, be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. To do that, just press the subscribe button on your screen.